you found that there were 3 contributors of DNA to that taillight attached to the vehicle, correct?
Correct.
One of those contributors appeared to be John O'Keefe. Is that fair to say?
He was included into the profile.
With regard to the other 2 contributors, who were they?
They could be anybody.
Were you ever asked to compare DNA samples from either Canton Police Detective Kevin Albert or Canton Police Chief Kenneth Berkowitz to the DNA profile that you analyzed from that passenger side taillight?
I was not.
Now, with regard to the broken drinking glass, which is item 3-2.1.1, do you see that in your report?
I do.
With regard to that, you came up with a DNA profile that also had 3 contributors, correct?
Correct.
One of those contributors appeared to be John O'Keefe, correct?
He was included, correct.
Who were the other 2 contributors?
I don't know. They could be anybody.
Were you ever asked with regard to that broken drinking glass to compare the DNA profile that you analyzed with the DNA of either Boston Police Sergeant Brian Albert or ATF agent Brian Higgins?
I was not.
Now, with regard to 7.1.2.1, or maybe it's 7-1.2.1, that's the stain A from the upper right leg of the jeans?
Correct.
All right. And you were aware, you were told that those were the jeans that John O'Keefe was wearing on the morning in question when he was found?
Based on the sample description, that's what it seems.
All right. And it turned out that his DNA was on his own jeans, correct?
He was included in the profile.
All right. And that was unsurprising to you, correct? And with regard to that item, you found that there were 3 contributors of DNA, correct?
Correct.
With John O'Keefe being one of them.
He was included in the profile, yes.
And who were the other 2?
I don't know. They could be anybody.
Let's move on to stain B, also from the upper right leg of the jeans. That is 7-1.3.1. You see that in your report?
I do.
When you found a DNA profile, how many contributors of DNA were there?
3 contributors.
All right. And again, this was John O'Keefe's jeans, correct?
Based on the description, yes.
So he was one of the 3 contributors.
He was included in the profile, yeah.
Who were the other 2?
I don't know. They could be anybody.
Moving on to stain C from the upper right leg of the jeans, 7-1.4.1. You see that in your report?
I do.
With regard to the DNA profile that you analyzed there, how many contributors of DNA were there to that profile?
At least 2, and it was interpreted as 2 contributors.
And again, this is the same pair of jeans that he was found in, correct?
Based on the description, yes.
And you said at least 2 contributors. It actually could have been more than 2.
Based on our protocols, I had to call it 2, and we determined it as 2, but it could be more than 2, yes.
Okay. Well, let's pay attention to the one that was not John O'Keefe, at least that one. Who contributed that DNA to his pants?
I don't know. It could be anybody.
Moving on to stain D, which is 7-1.5.1. And if I can just put my glasses on to make sure I've read my own writing correctly. Actually, is it 7-15-1? Did I get that wrong the first time?
D?
I'm sorry?
Do you mean
stain D? Stain D.
Stain D is 7-1.5.1.
Oh, I had it right the first time. Okay.
Right.
With regard to that stain, you also got a DNA profile, and how many contributors were there to that DNA profile?
I interpret it as 3 contributors.
And again, this is John O'Keefe's jeans, correct?
Correct.
He was one of the contributors to his own genes, correct?
He was included in the profile. Correct.
And with regard to that stain on the upper right leg of his jeans, who contributed the DNA to the who were the other two contributors of DNA to that stain?
I don't know. They could be anybody.
And then finally, with regard to that upper right leg of the jeans, there was also a stain E, correct?
Correct.
How many contributors did you find to that DNA profile?
2 contributors.
One of which was John O'Keefe to his own jeans, correct?
He was included, yes.
And who was the other contributor to that stain on the jeans?
It could be anybody. I don't know.
And by the way, just for the record, that was 7.1.6.1?
7-1.61.
7-1.6.1. Thank you, sir. Okay, now, with regard to the unstained area of the exterior of the jeans, do you see item 7-1.7.1?
Yes.
You found a DNA profile with regard to that unstained area as well, correct?
Correct.
How many contributors of DNA were there to that unstained area of the jeans?
I interpreted it as 4 contributors.
And John O'Keefe was one of those, correct?
He was included in the profile.
His own jeans.
Based on the description, yes.
Who were the other 3 contributors to that DNA profile?
I don't know. It could be anybody.
And before we move on to the sneaker, I just wanted to ask you a question about the passenger side taillight that I neglected to ask you. That was the one where there were 3 contributors, correct? And again, I'm going back to 3-1.1.
Correct.
Sorry to skip around, sir. I'm not trying to make this any more confusing than it is. With regard to the passenger side taillight and that DNA profile, are you able to determine when that DNA was deposited on the passenger side taillight that was attached to the vehicle?
No, I'm not.
Are you able to testify with any certainty that it was deposited there, say, on January 28th or 29th of 2022?
No, I can't.
So, consistent with your analysis of it, are you able to say whether it occurred prior to January 28th of 2022?
No, I can't.
Were you aware that that vehicle was John O'Keefe's girlfriend's vehicle?
I was not.
Were you provided any information about just how often he had been in and around that vehicle prior to January 28th of 2022? So moving on to 7-3.1, which was the right instep of the sneaker, correct? You see that in your report?
Yep.
With regard to that particular stain, you noted how many contributors of DNA?
Yeah, it was interpreted as at least 5 contributors.
And when you have interpreted it as at least 5 contributors, what does that do to your ability to find out who contributed that DNA?
So based on our protocols, we're not able to do any comparisons to any mixtures that are 5 or more contributors, so it's not suitable for comparisons.
Okay, which means that with regard to the sneaker at least, you couldn't even say whether John O'Keefe's DNA was on it, correct?
Correct.
And with regard to all 5, do you have any idea who contributed the DNA to that sneaker?
No, I don't.
Now, moving on to, I just have a couple more for you, sir. Moving on to what is labeled as stain L, which is 7-18.14.1, I believe. Do you see that in your report?
I do.
And that was a stain on the back bottom of his long sleeve shirt, correct?
Correct.
And were you told that the long sleeve shirt was his outer clothing when he was found?
I don't believe so.
How many contributors to that stain on the back bottom of his long sleeve shirt did you find in that DNA profile?
I interpreted it as 2 contributors.
And did you make any match with regard to either of those contributors or both?
I did comparisons, and John O'Keefe was included as one of the contributors.
Okay, so John O'Keefe was a contributor of DNA to his own long sleeve shirt, correct?
Based on the descriptions, correct.
All right, and whose other DNA was on that shirt?
I don't know.
And then finally, with regard to 7-18.17.1, that was an unstained area of the exterior of that shirt, correct? That same long sleeve shirt.
Correct.
And you tested that and got a DNA profile, correct?
Correct.
How many contributors were there to that DNA profile?
I interpreted it as 2 contributors.
Was John O'Keefe one of them?
He was included as one of the contributors.
Okay, so his DNA was found on his own shirt, correct?
Based on the description, correct.
And who contributed the other DNA profile to John O'Keefe's sweatshirt?
I don't know.
With regard to any of the stains on the upper right leg of the jeans, I counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that you've discussed here today. Were you ever asked to compare the DNA profile with the DNA profiles of either Brian Higgins or Brian Albert?
I was not. Oh,
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
And your answer was you were not?
I was not.
Did anybody ever provide you with DNA profiles of Brian Higgins or Brian Albert?
Sustained.
I just have one more question for you, Mr. Porto, and I do want to thank you for answering all my questions here today. You wrote reports on your analysis of all the items and the work that you did on this case?
I did.
And you are directed, pursuant to protocol, to address those reports to somebody, correct?
Correct.
Who was it that you sent the reports to in this case?
I'm sustaining the objection.
Did you send those reports to Michael Proctor?
Sustained. Jurors, strike the question.
I have nothing further. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Porto, based on your training and experience and years of doing DNA testing at the lab, when it comes to samples from items of clothing, is it uncommon or common to have multiple contributors?
That depends. It can happen, but it's possible, yes.
Is it something that's a complete anomaly?
I wouldn't say so, no.
Now, turning your attention back to item 3-1.1, that's a sample from the passenger side taillight of the defendant's vehicle, correct?
Correct.
And Mr. O'Keefe was found to, his known DNA profile was found to be an inclusion for the DNA profile from the swab from the defendant's passenger side taillight, correct?
He was included in the profile, yes.
And to what statistical, what is the number associated with that inclusion, sir?
The DNA profile from this item is 510 non-alien times more likely to have it originated from John O'Keefe and 2 unknown individuals than if it originated from 3 unknown, unrelated individuals.
Now, Mr. Porter, if I could turn you back to number 10 in your report. There's a number of different items listed there, correct?
Correct.
And as far as the items listed associated with various stains on various areas of Mr. O'Keefe's orange T-shirt and gray long-sleeve shirt, there's about 13 different DNA profiles that you generated in reference to those items, correct?
Correct.
And from those 13 different items, they're all from a single contributor, is that correct?
Correct. They were interpreted as originated from a single contributor.
And as far as the DNA profile, your comparison of each of those 13 different stains on the orange T-shirt and the gray long-sleeve shirt, what were your conclusions again as your comparison with the known standard of John O'Keefe?
Yeah, so the profile was interpreted as originated from a single contributor, and the DNA profile from these items is at least 490 octillion times more likely if it originated from John O'Keefe than if it originated from an unknown, unrelated individual. This provides support for an inclusion.
And lastly, with reference to the fingernail clippings from both the right hand and the left hand of Mr. O'Keefe, those were also, your analysis provided for inclusion of Mr. O'Keefe's known DNA standard, correct?
He was included in the profile, correct.
And again, the profile from both the right hand and the left hand fingernail clippings was a single source contributor, correct?
Sustained.
How many sources were associated with those?
Objection.
Sustained.
Nothing further.